So your view on the kind of snapshot of the FDI environment in 2011 and what that really told us about the kind of appetite to invest in greenfield projects?
Sure. Well, I guess this report specifically or primarily looks at the number of projects that went through on a global basis in 2011. Obviously, with issues around Europe and the debt crisis there, we had the natural disasters in the Asia Pacific region with the earthquake, the tsunami in Japan, we had that nuclear reactor issue, and floods in Thailand. The growth rate at 5.6% was probably lower than what one would have expected, but I think the view is that going forward, as the global economy stabilizes, we should see that number increasing.
Yeah.
So we had total capital investment was up 1.2% to 860 billion roughly, and job creation up 2.5% to 2.27 million jobs. So an upward trend, but I think obviously your more developed economies were growing at a lot slower pace than.
Yeah, and that of course is an indication of the the key trend we're seeing. Money is chasing where the growth is. Correct. And growth is certainly not in the developed world right now. And also interesting that money is chasing where the resource-rich countries are. So what are your thoughts on kind of the trends we're seeing and the numbers that speak into that?
As you say. A lot of the investment is being driven by your Asian giants, so the likes of China, who are very resource hungry. So that filters through to oil and gas, for example. We've seen a lot of investment coming into the African region for that. So I think that is the trend we'll continue to see. I think 35 billion in the Middle East and Africa region in 2011, which was the highest inward investment in terms of total amount, was into the the coal, oil and natural gas sector, followed by metals and minerals at 27 billion. So the primary extractive sector still remains the largest generator of inward capital.
It's hard to really look at that number because it includes the Middle East, and then it's skewed towards the oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. But interesting, when you look at the 24% increase in FDI projects, it's Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa that make the list of the top 10 countries.
Correct. And obviously those are your big three regional powerhouses. South Africa and Southern Africa, Nigeria, West Africa, Kenya, and East Africa. So I think you would expect that a lot more of that investment would go into those regions. But having said that, if you look at the UN's World Investment Report for 2012, where they actually break down into region, I think they estimate Africa's generated 42.7 billion in terms of inward investment. And again, they say that was dominated by the sort of oil and gas sector. So you've got Nigeria, Angola, for example, in the top two with over 3 billion, along with South Africa.
Certainly is interesting if you look at who's investing, because I saw comments from China's Commerce Minister today saying they need to put their $3.2 trillion stockpile of foreign reserves to work, and that certainly is going to mean more outbound direct investment, and one would assume that would flow into Africa, which has been a main target to date.
Yes, I think certainly, as we said earlier, China has been one of the biggest sources of inward investment, especially over the last decade. I mean, we read all the time that, for example, the US is trying to make a bigger push into Africa because they're falling behind your BRIC nations, in particular China and India, and more recently Brazil, to a lesser extent Russia. So yeah, certainly would expect to see a lot more.
But you certainly have to also, put that into the context of who's competing for this money and where other growth stories are, because you've got Latin America. I saw growth numbers there, project numbers up 22%, that's 10% of total projects. And Brazil, fantastic numbers, capital invested in terms of the number of projects up 48%. So overall, you're competing with Latin America, another high growth region, as well as Asia. What's the incentive to put the money into Africa going forward?
Well, I guess Africa's advantage, other than perhaps from an oil perspective, where you've got in your Latin American countries, they do have large oil reserves. But in terms from a minerals perspective, for example, I think Africa has obviously got quite a large diversified pool of resources, a lot of them untapped. So we'll see that continuing to be a major play. You've got your agricultural sector. 60%, I think, of Africa's land, of Africa's arable land, is still underutilized. So you'll see a lot of investment coming into there. But also a lot of the money that we talk about is coming out of your Brazil region, coming into Africa. So even Brazilian companies, your Vales, are coming into Africa looking for growth. So in terms of the overall environment, obviously it's up to governments to try and make their investment policies a lot more investor friendly. But with Africa at the moment, again, that the World Investment Report estimates only 2.8% of FDI was coming into Africa last year, out of the total pool. So Africa is still a very small portion. Yeah. So it's a lot easier for it to go from 2.8% to 5% than perhaps to go from 15% to 30%. So I think we'll see a large impact of that foreign investment coming through.